Salutations, respective viewers. I am George from Ireland. So this video is about Paula White, the televangelist, charlatanry, psychology, and more broadly, the Republican Party, right-wing movements in the United States, the interconnectivity between all these things. So in case you don't know, Paula White is a Chaucerian chancer. She's a televangelist. She goes in the United States and claims to preach Christianity, and for her, really the core message of Christianity is give money to me. That's the central ethic of the Bible, according to Paula White, though she wouldn't put it quite so honestly. So this woman was born in Mississippi, 1966, didn't grow up very wealthy. She left education when she was 18, has no experience of tertiary education. Nothing wrong with that. Not a particularly academic person, but obviously it's galling that she should then have herself introduced as doctor, when that's obviously another flagrant lie that she was telling. She might say, well, I didn't tell it, but these people who were introducing you, who work for you, where on earth did they get the idea that you had that title? So she's not really just about faith. She's also a Trump toady, and she's very relevant because only a few days ago she was appointed to some position in the White House, the director of the Faith Outreach Initiative, Faith and Opportunity, something like that. So really, she's going to be a Trump spokeswoman and trying to sell the Trump brand to a very receptive market. People are willing to hear his message, and that is Christian fundamentalists. Now, not all Christian fundamentalists are on board with her. There are plenty of them who loathe her. Even people I find pretty loathsome, they detest her and they recognize her for what she is, just an outright fraud, a con artist. And there are obviously many more people in this field scamming the vulnerable. It was a man's world almost exclusively, so it's unusual to see a woman who's in this sector. Now, if you're a feminist, believe in equal opportunities, might say, well, if men have got away with gulling people out of their money in the name of religion for millennia, isn't it refreshing that just for once a female should do likewise? Okay, whatever a man can do, a woman can do better. So Christian evangelicals, Christian fundamentalists, the two expressions are coterminous. They're a core constituency for the Republican Party. So you could look at various ways of breaking down the U.S. population and try to determine the likelihood of someone voting Republican. Look at race, look at age, look at income, look at level of education, look at whether they own a gun or not. If so, what type? Is it a handgun? Is it an assault rifle? If they own guns, how many? Is it 1? Is it 20? Which state they live in? The population density of the county they live in, various things. And another thing is religious denomination, but also how often they attend worship. Is it never? Is it on a yearly basis, more like monthly, more like weekly, more like daily? And one of the strongest indicators of tendency to vote for the Republican Party is religiosity. Okay, so what would put you sky high, like about 99% chance you're going to vote for the Republican Party if you're a white male in a very low population density place in the southern part of the United States. You own lots of guns. You attend worship on a daily basis, and you had a high income. Pretty unlikely those would all come together. Then and you had no experience of third level education. All this would make it very, very probable that you'd vote for the Grand Old Party. So Paula White, she appeals to people who are irrational, and she spends her time disseminating these irrational beliefs. So an evangelist for the cause of anti-environmentalism, of being anti-gun control, guns out of control, bullets flying in all directions is going to reduce the death toll, in her view, of being anti-gay. So far as I know, she's not anti-black. They say that she speaks in Ebonics, knows African-American vernacular. Is she anti-Hispanic? I don't think so. Said a few anti-Muslim things. So anti-environmental and anti-science, indeed anti-evolution. Really someone who seems to consider the Enlightenment to be absolutely catastrophic and probably satanic. There was this theorem around in the 19th century. I can't remember the name of the British divine who came up with this one, but all the evidence for evolution was planted by the Lord as a way to test our faith. okay, and we've got to disregard it. And I know it was taught to children by some religious studies teachers in the UK as recently as the 1950s. My history teacher, when he was a little boy, he was told that one. He said that is absolute bunkum. Anyway, so she and her lot, they're anti-big government, except when it comes to the use of force. If it's the police or the military or prisons or something like that. Now, I don't disagree with absolutely everything. Obviously, country needs to have a military and police, and sometimes it is right to use force. So, not into Christian forgiveness, especially when it comes to people convicted of petty crimes, possession of drugs, and so on. So, this woman, she's an extrovert. She's certainly fond of the sound of her own voice. But she's a bit of an outcast, even amongst Christian evangelicals. Why have they rejected her? Is it sexism? That might be part of it. Now, there are lots of things to despise about her, not her gender, obviously. There's obviously a great deal of vanity in her, and I'm a somewhat vain person as well. Incidentally, I don't set myself up as a paragon of virtue. I'm not a role model, so please don't try and follow my example. I'm not suggesting I'm exemplary. So I castigate her, which is not to suggest that I'm better. But here I am. I'm not promising you the keys to the New Jerusalem. I'm not like a real estate agent for heaven. Give me money and I guarantee you'll get into heaven. I would like her to actually try that, selling title deeds. Probably do very well, actually. So, does she want to store up treasure in this world or the next? It's blatant to me, because remember Jesus Christ saying, don't care about worldly goods. If you're virtuous, you'll store up many treasures in the kingdom of heaven where no thief can steal them. All right. So if she really believed in the gospel, Paula White would be doing that. But there she is, raking in the cash very busily. She's always engaged in that, heaping up hoards of gold. So she spends her time preying on the feeble-minded, but you should watch her show. It's compelling viewing, also sick-making, gulling people. I presume some of them are mentally subnormal. Seems to me you'd have to believe to be believing that absolute tripe. People are desperate. They're jobless. They're ill. They're at home all day watching this pap on television. People in my country would be classified as vulnerable adults. Okay, they're not children, but in some ways mentally they are children. They'd be, well, sorry, quite an ugly word, retarded, borderline. Anyway, so these people are ill, and because of their maladies, well, they crave help, and she's saying that she can sort it all out for them, so long as you send me money. Well, I mean, even if you believe in Christianity, and I don't, Jesus wants you to be a good person, according to the Bible, and to pray and so on, not to send money to a human being. Where does he ever say that? Give money to people like Paula White. So it's nauseating to prey on the anxieties of these people. And of course, by making their financial situation even worse, you could make their anguish even worse. And obviously, stress is going to aggravate any health problem that they have, because most health problems are exacerbated by stress. Any physician would tell you that. What happened to Jesus Christ saying, give away all your worldly possessions? Well, Paula White patently doesn't believe in that. Or remember what St. Paul said, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's often misquoted as money is the root of all evil, but it's the love of money. She blatantly loves it. Otherwise, why is she asking in every single show to give loads of money, being a multimillionairess? Now, it's not bad to be rich, or I mean, mainstream Christianity wouldn't say it's bad to be rich, but we've got to make it in an ethical manner. And the Catholic Church, I dislike the Catholic Church in some regards. I was brought up as a Catholic, but it does have a few decent ethics. And one of them is, you must always remember you're dealing with people. You set up a business, you want to make a big profit, but you must always remember people involved. Hello there, Sutherland and the Big Apple. Okay, you can't fire 1,000 people just to increase your margins. No, the human beings here. So we've got to take some account of that. Anyway, it's emetic that she is preaching the gospel, standing up there as though she is a paragon of virtue. What about love your enemy? She certainly doesn't preach that when it comes to what she'd like to do to America's enemies. Remember, do good to those who hate you. Well, she certainly doesn't believe that. The thing is, the Bible, having been written over several centuries, and written by scores of authors, it obviously contains myriad contradictions, because the different personalities writing it in different countries, indeed, in different languages, in 3 different languages. So that's why you can find whatever you want in there. You can find exhortations to pacifism or indeed to genocide. It's the Ethnic Cleanser's Manual. But remember this one about be good to the sojourner? That's in the Old Testament. Sojourner, obviously that's from the King James Bible. We'd now call a sojourner, well, a refugee, an asylum seeker, an illegal immigrant. But she certainly doesn't believe that. She has advocated for Trump's very harsh rules at the border, splitting up families. So much for family values, hey? Incidentally, Paula White, she's been married thrice. Now, I'm not judgmental. I wouldn't care if she was never married if she married 100 times. Um, but Christian fundamentalists tend to be very judgmental about these issues, have very strong issues, saying marriage is sacred, marriage is for life, and they're holier than thou, and they're oh so judgmental about anyone who gives birth outside marriage, and so on. But somehow give people like her a pass. This redemption thing, it works for them, but they won't allow it to members of the Democratic Party, to people who are liberals or socialists, and so on. Anyway, Paula White, she's always immaculately turned out. Clothing is impeccable and her hair's always styled and so on. Why? Again, wouldn't it be vanity caring about your appearance? There are Christians who eschew personal vanity, like nuns and monks and so on, dressing very plainly. Some people, well, some of the extremist Mormon sects and so on, and not showing off, not trying to be beautiful, as unostentatious as you can get. Now, that seems very extreme and distasteful for me. I don't want to take away the joy out of life, but clearly she cares about her looks, and that plays well. People say, oh, she looks good, she's stylish, so I'm going to give money to her. Nothing to do with faith. It's all so worldly. It's all so superficial. If you really believe in the faith, then you would worship at home, or if you had to worship in a community, you'd be willing to worship in a shack. It doesn't have to be a huge cathedral. And I see this in Christianity and other religions, how hugely wasteful it is building these enormous cathedrals or temples. The millions of man hours that went into constructing medieval cathedrals, which could have been spent on just producing more food for people, decent housing, flood defences, anything would be less wasteful than that. But so much is squandered on showing off. It's all ostentation. It's all vainglorious. Anyway, so she's so groomed. Has she had work done? It appears that way to me. So it seems to me that people believe in raiment. It's all about the garments. And if you really believe that clothes matter in making something holy, why do you just buy a suit rather than watch her show or give money to her? Not even for yourself, just there. And people are so stupid in many cases in this way, caring about the clothes, whether it's the teacher or the doctor or the police officer or the soldier, or I can't think, the business executive, the banker, the insurance broker. Why? Why do you care? It doesn't make you more effective or less effective, but most people are that trite and they will just be impressed by threads. Because any idiot can wear expensive clothes. Doesn't make you more effective or competent, doesn't make you less effective or competent. But there we are. So, but she's preaching the prosperity gospel, so she's got to look the part, look like she's affluent, and then people believe in her. It's that simple. It's that crude. So many people fall for this. I wish the United States had one of these legal principles that England and Wales have. Obviously, there's a common law system in the United States as well as in England and Wales, and that's presumed undue influence, as in if a religious leader persuades a disciple to give him or her lots of money, that's presumed to be undue influence, as in you have too much control of that person's mind, be able to persuade them to do things which are not in their best interest to give you money. Now, if you go to church on Sunday and put £5 in as a donation, nobody's going to argue with that. But if you're a person on a low income gives £1,000 to your preacher, to him personally, not to be spent on the religion, then that would be presumed to be undue influence because you repose trust in him. Hello, Mrs. G. And he is able to get you to do things which disadvantage you. And that it's not readily explicable. Someone with very little money giving such a huge donation to someone else, it's presumed they have too much control over your mind. Now, what's the cutoff? I know this is debatable. Should it be £6? Should it be £7? Should it be £1,000,000? Where is it? There is an exact legal level. But, I mean, it's a rebuttable presumption if somehow the religious leader could convince a court that this was reasonable, that he or she didn't have an excessive degree of influence over the person's mind, then the court would say, all right, that's acceptable. And the Charities Commission here have to supervise the finances of religious organisations to see that it's not mostly going just so the religious leader can live in the lap of luxury. I know you might say that encroaches too much on personal liberty. People should be allowed to make their own decisions, even foolish ones. If a very poor person wishes to give away all his goods and chattels to a very rich person, we shouldn't stand in their way. We should allow the strong to push the weak to the wall. That's one way of looking at it, like freedom of contract theory. Anyway, so she apparently had quite a few African American congregants, which is unusual, I suppose. At least it proves she's not racist, which is laudable. But to me, she's an anti-hero, even though she's adulated by her many followers. And I was staggered to see some of the stuff she was saying. What chutzpah. Where I walk, God walks. When I speak, God speaks. It was jaw-dropping. Blasphemy. Now, I don't believe in Christianity, but many people do. I'm not against Christianity. Some of it's praiseworthy. But she's saying that she is God. What else could I possibly infer from her words? Is she mentally ill? In any psychiatric unit, you could find people who have this God delusion, who believe that they are divine. So this has been denounced as heresy by many others, saying that she had the authority to declare the White House holy ground. I don't think any other religious leaders ever said that it is. And sorry, what is holy ground? If it's holy, we can't do what on it, or we can do something else? I don't know. That miracles are going to happen there? You can't urinate on it, presumably? Or it's ludicrous. The very idea of holiness, a person or an item or whatever, has to be treated with special reverence. Anyway, so many people think it was a profanity, just misusing the faith for these narrow partisan political ends. And she said that anyone who tells you to deny yourself is Satan. Well, she obviously believes that Jesus Christ is Satan, because he was saying that, to be self-sacrificing. It appears that she's staggeringly ignorant of the gospel. I notice she doesn't actually read from it that much. Now, incidentally, I'm not a biblical scholar. So she claims that she's been traduced, that she's been called all these terrible things, and that indicates her martyrdom, although she didn't actually use the word martyrdom. Is she was very cunning in being able to turn this to her advantage. People like Jim Jones of the People's Temple, the one who led that mass suicide in Guyana back in 1979, that American preacher, he did the same thing, that I'm being attacked and it proves that we're being persecuted, and it drew his community closer to him, made them believe in him even more blindly. So she's being called a heretic and adulterer. Well, that's because she's both. Again, it doesn't bother me one whit, but it ought to bother her followers. So this is also a scintillating study in cognitive dissonance. So that's when you hold some cognitions, you subscribe to those particular beliefs, and the two collide. What are you going to do? Something's got to give. You should throw away this one, or maybe throw away that one, and one of those could make sense. They couldn't both make sense, or usually they try and weasel their way out of it. But they tend to dig deeper in their beliefs, become even more entrenched in their position when their leader is attacked, verbally attacked, or could even be physically. There's also this sunk cost fallacy. Yeah, but I've committed to it. I put so much time, donated so much money. I can't have been had. No, I can't have been conned. I must shut my mind very firmly to that possibility, because that would just be too upsetting. I'd feel like such a chump. It's a bit like these people who believe in Trump. The minister says, what you believe and the way you live your life makes God happy. The congregants leave the church feeling good about themselves Sunday after Sunday. Yeah, so it is kind of a feel-good message. And I've seen it. It's upbeat, it's cheerful, it's colourful, it's bright. It's everything that we associate with positivity. The music, she's smiling almost all the time. So, yeah, you leave on a high. It's a bit like some hymns which are really uplifting. Whereas I know Protestant fundamentalist worship can be irate a lot of the time and distasteful, or Roman Catholic worship, and that's the denomination I was brought up, it can be just so bland, so formulaic, so cold, just repeating these words off by heart, things you had to learn by rote. It's like reciting a phone number or something, or decades of the Rosary, reflecting on joyful mysteries and sorrowful mysteries, and then saying as quickly as possible, would appeal to someone who's very Asperger's, saying, Hail Mary, full of grace, the blessed are thou with Jesus, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for sinners now and the hour of our death. And women doing decades of the Rosary, or could be men, would say at that kind of pace. and it was point scoring, having so many more repetitions. There were all these absurd beliefs promulgated by the Catholic Church, like if you attended church on, I think, Saturday, not just Sunday, also Saturday for so many Sundays, you get into heaven definitely. That one was still going in the 1950s. I think Protestant churches tend not to propound views which are so, well, what else can I say? Formulaic, just about going through the motions. Anyway, so coming back to the psychology of the people who would believe in Paula White, yeah, they've made an emotional commitment, and there's a bit of ethnocentrism it's often about the United States, how it's so godly, how it's created by Jesus Christ as the plan, that the Lord wrote the U.S. Constitution, stuff like that. Despite the founding fathers not actually particularly religious, especially by the sounds of the 18th century, the U.S. Constitution, which is rooted in the Enlightenment, and not particularly in Christianity, is not against Christianity, but wanting setting up this wall of separation, as the Supreme Court said, between church and state, whereas that was really unique in the world at the time. They were almost all religiously informed states with an established church, with religious minorities discriminated against or even persecuted. So there's a lot of religiocentrism, that our religion is the moral one, and the others are wicked, and this has got to be the centre of your life. Just this instant assumption of Christian superiority and morality. And sometimes it is moral, and sometimes it's not, and you could be very moral in another religion, and other religions at other times have been more civilized and humane. Like until the 1820s, about 200 death penalty offences in England, Sharia law was more humane than that. It doesn't play well, I think, with some Christian fundamentalists to say that. It might have even been true in the United States at the time. Not sure how many death penalty offences there were in various states back then. I think some states even had the death penalty, had the death penalty for theft into the 1950s. Not that it was ever imposed for theft in the 50s, so far as I'm aware. Anyway, so there's belief disconfirmation. You believe whatever and it's proven to be false. Do you abandon your belief? That would be the rational thing to do, but a lot of people don't. So religion is a mind virus, as Richard Dawkins has said. But I'm not completely anti-religious. I'll go to church myself sometimes. I find some of it comforting. You know, it's a delusion. It provides people with some solace. You know, supposing there's a couple and their child is dying of leukemia, and the child does eventually die in great agony, the distress is just unbearable. If these people can delude themselves into believing that their child has gone to a better place, to the great big toy shop in the sky, and is content now, I can't perceive any harm in them subscribing to that bogus belief. And I'm not going to try and shatter their illusions. I would like it to be true. I'd like there to be a second life. I would like to meet my friends and relatives who've died. I just don't believe there's any evidence for it. And indeed, there's a superabundance of evidence to the contrary. So, yeah, some of the people who follow her, I'm guessing, would have this subclinical dissociative disorder. This propensity to believe things, magical thinking. I remember hearing this sort of cure for warts in Ireland ages ago, that rub the wart with a coin and then put it under a stone, the wart will go away. And a woman told me this, a very old woman, died over 20 years ago, and looked at me with utter conviction. She believed it. Not an iota of doubt in her mind. Hi there, Graal. And I was a little boy at the time. I thought, but that couldn't possibly work. If you put the coin under the stone first, would that somehow give it some property? I sound under the weather. Brilliant, but under the weather. Yeah, I'm a tiny bit croaky because, there's been a lot of precipitation here. Ayn Rand said that people who believe in God suffer from psychological weakness. I agree with her. Well, perhaps that's true. I mean, there are other psychological weaknesses, not like that. But, there's some very well-adjusted, brainy people who believe in it. But I would like to see a breakdown of this, that the more educated you are, the less likely you are to believe. Although Professor Dawkins pointed out that amongst, I think, biological scientists, the propensity to disbelieve is very, very high indeed. And people who can't understand rational explications more like to believe in mythology. and not understand a myth as being, say, an allegory or something, or a parable. Think it really is true. That's the thing about, we're told Adam and Eve stories and we're to believe it in a literal sense. But in more recent times, liberal Christianity is trying to rework it and sell it as simply a parable. That, right, we're to understand these things symbolically, because they think it's just not defensible in the 21st century for people of logic to believe in such fairy tales. But where did I get to? So, yeah, magical thinking about the curing the wart thing. I thought, well, if the coin was under the stone, would it pick up some sort of properties to make it go away? But if you put it under the stone afterwards, how could that possibly affect whether you have a wart or not? It's completely illogical. There we are. So, belief, perseverance. A lot of our people will believe in her even after it's become absolutely flagrant that she's just trying to fleece them. These sort of people will believe in the paranormal as well, you know, in speaking in tongues, when it's just drivel. I could speak in tongues now. Feel so silly, I don't want to. And people believe that's the Holy Spirit. I mean, it's play acting. She's hamming it up. And a lot of people fall for such ridiculous, infantile antics. But so when you have two beliefs and they collide, is it with this sort of double thing, like George Orwell said, holding two beliefs in your mind equally strongly that are mutually contradictory. It causes mental discomfort. So people try and mitigate this. I mean, one of my Russian pupils, he said he was a communist and he was a Christian. I pointed out that these two ideologies were at loggerheads. The Communist Party in the Soviet Union had viciously persecuted Christianity, seized most of the churches, executed thousands of monks, priests, and nuns, sent tens of thousands to the Gulag, religious believers severely persecuted. You had to proclaim yourself an atheist to join the Communist Party, yet he still wanted to believe in both. Or loads of things, you know, believing in that communism was good and why did it end, and you know, you don't actually believe in it. Otherwise, why don't you wait outside the shop for 3 hours before buying food, because you would have had to queue for 3 hours before buying basic foodstuffs in the communist era. He didn't want to believe that. Of course, he came from a privileged family. Communism was all meant to be all about equality, but it was a very unequal society. Anyway, so how do you deal with this mental discomfort? Denialism, claim that that evidence isn't there, that is there, or that they somehow don't contradict each other, lawyering your way out of it. So ignoring the truth so often, and doomsday cults are a bit like that. When doomsday doesn't actually come, yet they persist in their belief. And such people are often very categorical about things. So Paula is a parasite. She's a parasite on their minds, but also on their wallets. So she predates people and just gets them to hand over money to her. And she's always about taking and not about giving. If you're really doing the Lord's work, you should be happy to do it for free. So going after feeble-minded people, exploiting them, it's nauseating. So she is also a cheerleader for the most rapacious sort of capitalists. I'm not against capitalism. I believe in capitalism. It can be a good thing. When I am a capitalist to some extent, making a profit, that's all right. There are obviously certain limitations, not to really exploit people, not to wreck the environment and so on. Have some sort of minimum wage, have some modicum of social justice, but with her, really, it's not like that at all. You know, these people who are against the minimum wage or against environmental production and Trump wanting to pollute more and more, beautiful, clean coal. If you really think coal is clean, why does he never live beside a coal-fired power station? You know, here in London there used to be terrible pollution, smog in the 1950s, till the Clean Air Act banned the burning of coal in the city, and the air quality has improved remarkably. Still not good enough. We've got too many vehicles, not that they're using coal, but could get better still. Look how horrifically polluted China is from coal-fired power stations, as well as motor vehicles that are not electric. Anyway, Christians should care about ecology. What about stewardship? You know, Book of Genesis. Christian fundamentalists are supposed to be keen on that. The mankind is given dominion over the world, supposed to look after it on behalf of the Almighty. Why can't he look after it on his own behalf? But there we are. So there's this brazenness with which she advocates for these truly immoral causes and demands people hand over their hard-earned lucre to her. So it's all about hard cash with her. There's icy calculation. What is going to get me the most money? And if I appear to rich, people want to make me richer because they think I'm successful. They're somehow buying into success. Wow, it's quite dispiriting that so many people are that dim-witted. But Trump is the same, of course. Anyway, a lot of them are Pharisees, banging on about being religious. Nobody knows more than the Bible about the Bible than me, said Trump. You know, this boastfulness is obviously sickening, and he clearly doesn't know much about the Bible, not knowing that about these epistles, he had to call them first and second, not one and two. Trump obviously he betrayed himself, showing that he knows nothing about church etiquette, doesn't know what the offering plate is. He's never donated money to anyone, just about, considering he's a billionaire 5 times over, according to himself. What a creeping Jesus! This immodesty really sticks in the craw. But anyway, Paula White, morality aside, I've got to hand it to her for coming from nowhere and making a fortune, admittedly through very unethical means. So this woman has certain abilities. She's charismatic, and she's got self-assurance and spades. She goes in for a lot of self-laudation, self-adoration, which I find deeply unpleasant. And she uses that self-esteem culture to sort of to big up her congregation, tell her congregants that they're good moral people and Jesus loves them. They need to hear it from her. She certainly believes in herself, and that's why people can only believe in you if you believe in yourself. Anyway, not that much of her act, and it is an act, is about Jesus Christ, what it actually says in the Bible. So it's a very emotional style. And I suppose she's talking about everyday problems sometimes, like a married woman who thinks her husband is flirting with another woman, what to do about it. But what's her meta-narrative? I suppose that is that her followers are good, others are evil, and that she's the best of all, and that's it. And if you are good, you have to give money to her, and then you get a bit of her goodness. But is there any evidence against her? It proves there's a demonic conspiracy against her. So you're the Antichrist if you point out that she is just a greedy fraudster. Anyway, she would say all this kind of stuff is slander, and it serves only to reinforce group solidarity when people inveigh against her. So she doesn't seem to feel there's any requirement to adhere to what's actually said in the Bible. I mean, I don't either. Right, there are a few moral injunctions there, that some of it's deeply immoral, some of it's neutral. And by the way, I've broken, I think, of the Decalogue, probably 9 of those commandments. The only one is that I haven't committed is murder. So some people have a predisposition to experience things that aren't real, to hear things, see things, hallucinations, and these are sort of mental illnesses, but also maybe to misattribute things, to get over a disease and think it's because they sent money to her, to find a job and think it's because they sent money to her, not through their own efforts. Anyway, people who follow her, they're redolent of that line in Life of Brian. You really must see it, that 1979 Monty Python film, which is a send-up of mainstream religion. When John Cleese is playing someone in 1st century AD Judea, and goes up to Brian, whom they've decided is the Messiah, and says, "You are the Messiah, and I should know. I've followed a few." And I couldn't do the facial expression, but there's something about his facial expression which just made me roar. It's side-splitting. This hopeless naivety, this over-eagerness to believe in something, anything. So how credulous and naive can you be? Okay, because I think it was Oscar Wilde who said it. When people don't believe in religion, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. Although, in this case, they're believing in Paula. So she is a religion, kind of, but it's almost like she's setting herself up as the goddess. People who've gone beyond conventional religion, believing in horoscopes or palmistry, having my future read. I had my palm read in India. I knew it was bull, I knew it was being conned, but for sheer entertainment value, I went along. Absolute hogwash, saying, I mean, he did guess some things right about me, but I think he got me to write things down. I was very careful he couldn't see them, palm my hand, but this palm reader, he had his assistant who disappeared, and was he some distance behind me with like a telescope or whatever, somehow reading it, somehow signaling to the palm reader what to say. But anyway, so the man told me that a certain date in November 2000 I would meet a young lady called Sophia, the love of my life. We'd get married, we'd have 3 children. Well, none of that's happened. If you go back a century ago, people were into phrenology, which was feeling their skulls, and lumps on your skulls could tell you, your skull could tell you loads about your personality. And nobody believes in that particular type of drivel these days. I'm talking about misattributing things and these foolish beliefs. I remember this South African nurse who's my colleague years ago, and she were in a difficult situation with some toxic management at work, and she said that Jesus was looking out for her and her family and going to sort it out right, and we'll all be okay. And I thought, how can you believe such twaddle? I remember she said in South Africa she'd worked in hospitals and there'd be some children who were born there with HIV and they were dying of AIDS, not even 10 years old, dying in the greatest of pain and their most horrific lives, the just most heart-rending tales of hellish suffering. Jesus Christ didn't care about those children. He didn't save them. But he's going to save you, a relatively privileged woman with a decently paid job. He's going to sort out your work problems, but not save those kids. Come on. What should be the higher priority? So, another way that Paula White seems to contradict Christianity, particularly the Protestant variety, is she's not into sola scriptura. Otherwise, she'd actually stick to the Bible and not just make things up which are unbiblical. How about justification through faith alone? On that one, maybe she is right, saying if you only believe, don't have to do anything good or avoid doing things bad, really. It's not about virtue or the avoidance of iniquity. Catholicism is a bit like that. She does denounce sin, though. So it's all about point scoring through donations. Okay, give me more cash and then you're a better person. How do people not see through to this? How do they fall for this self-serving cant? Anyway, so there are true believers. They cannot analyze. It's groupthink. Everybody else is doing it. We're sheeple. Just follow the crowd. You could be lemmings going off the cliff, by the way. So it makes me call to mind what Saint Ignatius Loyola said. In case you don't know, he was this 16th century Catholic saint, had been a soldier, had been a very sinful person, a fornicator. In bed one day with his paramour, he looks up, sees the crucifix on the wall, and then he feels guilty. It reminds him of his duty to Christianity. But he founded the Society of Jesus, better known as the Jesuits, the intellectual shock troops of the Catholic Church. The Jesuits are very academic priests, and they try to reach out to the upper class in whichever society they're in, persuade them to be Christians, particularly Catholics. They're also fighting for the Counter-Reformation. But anyway, St. Ignatius Loyola, despite being a very erudite man, he said, I would believe that black is white if the Pope told me. And that encapsulates it. Religious people being willing to believe something that they know is false simply because of authority. So often it's the argument from authority, the Pope or my pastor or the Bible or whatever it is, and that's true. What they say, even if the evidence proves that to be bogus, this authority trumps any reasoned argument. So this is one of the also the scintillating distinctions they draw, that they suspend their critical faculties when it comes to religion, acquiescence, turning off their cognitive function with regards to faith. But though they're not skeptical about religion at all, they are skeptical about climate change, something which is empirically provable. There are testable hypotheses here. Religion's sometimes unfalsifiable. That's not true of things like climate change. So their critical faculties come into play when it comes to things that they don't like, and they've honed their cognitive abilities to be used against climate science, against evolution, against gun control, against arguments for publicly funded healthcare, particularly contraception, against sex education in schools, against evolution or whatever it is. And they cook up these elaborate, increasingly convoluted arguments against things which are either provable or have some reasoned arguments for them. So things like climate science, when you have something like 98% of climate scientists agree that, yeah, climate changing is happening and it's mainly anthropogenic, and that's that. But because there's a penumbra of doubt, a lot of these religious fundamentalists will say, oh, it's a 50-50, it's a toss-up, we don't know, when it's not. That, okay, it's not proved with absolute certainty, there's just a very, very high level of probability. And that's the same thing which applied to medicines, and these anti-vaxxers say, oh, well, because there's a tiny doubt, we have to go against it altogether, and stuff like that. Using semantics, saying, "Oh, climate change used to call it global warming, so, it's a bull because you changed the name of it," to try and argue that climate science is nonsense, or resorting to casuistry to say that these things don't work, or a bit like minimum wage saying, "Oh, if you're going to say $8 an hour, then why don't you say $1,000 an hour?" Or what other bogus arguments, saying, oh, well, yes, guns could kill people, but knives could kill people. If you're not going to ban knives, you can't ban guns, and things like that. Misdirection. So even when things are proved beyond the realm of doubt, they will oppose them in some cases. You could see how publicly funded healthcare leads to better health outcomes really across the board, and lower cost of healthcare in countries that have it, but still not going for it. Or that Paula White is principally motivated by money. All right, that's what she gets out of bed for. If she isn't actuated by money, stop asking for it. Give it away to those who actually need it, so they can actually pay their medical bills. Knowing that you love and serve God, isn't that enough reward? Maybe you don't expect a reward in heaven. That's why you want the money now. So they make this huge endeavour to scrutinise a reasoned argument and expose any flaws in it, any frailties of those who advocate for these causes that they find disagreeable. And that's the thing about these cognitions. Religion is very personal, and individuals are invested in it. It's part of his or her identity. They're part of the community. And if you leave that, you become an outcast, and that would be terrible. So you've got to stay in it. You've got to suppress any doubts. Better to keep stum about any reservations you have. They place immense value on it. You're staking your soul in it. If you believe in the wrong faith, you feel a right chump on Judgment Day, wouldn't you? I remember there's this great sketch by Rowan Atkinson from about 1990, where he plays the devil, and whatever, people are dead, here we are in hell. He said, okay, he said, telling people where to go bits in hell before he tortures them. Christians, go over there. The Jews were right. You say, you don't feel quite so smug, do you now, Christians? Because you might have happened to subscribe to the wrong faith. What if it turns out that Christianity is false and Buddhism is true? We would have been in big trouble. Not because you're a bad person, you're a Christian, or a necessarily good one because you're a Buddhist. You just happen to believe the wrong one. And why would you believe the wrong one? Largely because you got it from your parents. Anyway, so people don't want to think that they've been fooled, but they are being befooled by Paula all the time. Very bruising to the ego to think that you were stupid enough to allow yourself to be taken for a ride for years. The sunk cost fallacy. I've got to persist with it because I put all this time and money into it, and it's my identity and it's my community. So there was often a relationship between cognitions which is not consonant. Jesus rejected wealth. Paula craves wealth, but Paula is like Jesus. Now, how could you resolve this conundrum? You could say, actually, Paula is not like Jesus. I'll repeat it. Jesus rejected wealth. Paula craves wealth. Therefore, Paula is not like Jesus. Would be the obvious one. But as they can't accept that, they're going to say, no, Jesus did love wealth, or he loved it for other people, or something like that. Or else they can say, no, Paula doesn't actually like wealth, even though they know that she does. So that's how they try and get out of it, followers. There's a psychological stress which is occasioned by extreme inconsistency, and the magnitude of dissonance here is very great. That that the Bible is good, but the Bible tells us that committing genocide is acceptable. I know that genocide is evil, but how can the Bible be good then? Doesn't make any sense. The Bible says to be good to refugees. Paula says to be bad to refugees, but Paula gets a message from the Bible. It doesn't make any sense, does it? But people believe in appearance. They judge books by their cover, I'm afraid. Clothes. Do you read a lot? What's your university degree in mind psychology? Well, I did a bachelor's degree in history, and then I did a law degree, and I did a master's degree in linguistics. I've got a few other qualifications which are not degrees. I've never actually studied psychology. I've just dipped into it as a general reader. So people go by first impressions. It's terrible. part of the availability heuristic. What's the first information we get? It's a mental shortcut rather than reasoning things out. As a rule of thumb, this is generally right. If somebody's well dressed, they're smart, they have authority, they're rich, they're successful, so I should believe them, and I should like them, I should suck up to them. I suppose that's the thought process. So Paula, she certainly knows how to enrich herself, and she's found it a very lucrative business. She's an extrovert, she's affable, and for someone without any qualifications, it's a great way to make a fortune. She has empathy. I suppose she can read people like a book. Their psychology, knows which buttons to press, how to exploit them, how to butter them up, the buzzwords with people. So she's very canny in that way. Her prosody, her timbre are fantastic. So she's a highly effectual public speaker. She's got vocal range, she's got a certain studied spontaneity, she's got some go-to talking points. She has the ability to improvise. She's seldom lost for words. 3 degrees, yeah. Not of temperature. So she certainly provides a good show, and it's got pace as well. Now, I wouldn't say she's morally suboptimal, she is vile. It's totally unethical to be persuading poor people to give away their money and claiming that you're such a good person to do it. I'd have more respect if you just stole from shops. That would take a bit of audacity. All right, she's got chutzpah. She's just brass neck. Hello, Ben Perryman. So she's so brazen in demanding money. And on a website as bold as brass, give me money. Because that's what it's all about, the bottom line. So the profit motive is sacred, but not when it comes to selling pornography or prostitution or drugs for some reason. So she uses all these ruses, every trick in the book, saying that what she can get to get you your job back, or cure your illnesses. She's got a direct line to God. So patently, is avarice is what drives her. I don't want to single her out or unfairly. There are loads of men who are like that, or many of them gone, like Oral Roberts. And some of them, many of the more famous ones have died. Perhaps the American public is not as gullible as it was. It's not most Americans, there's only a minority fall for this. I know all religions are like this to some extent. Look at my type of Christianity, the one I was brought up in. But really, this is mammon worship. Paula White taking advantage of people of, I suppose, academically inferior ability. I remember Christopher Hitchens talking about Christianity, noticing there were fat shepherds and lean sheep. Now, I know Paula is trim. I'm not saying that she's obese, but he's obviously using this metaphorically to mean rich, and the followers are giving away the wealth. It's a massive redistribution of wealth from the impecunious almost to the affluent. It's like the old quip: the Italians preached Catholicism, but the Irish believed it. Okay, so we were less wealthy than Italy, but we had to give money to them. And it's like, I think they came up with this in Watergate scandal. Really, if you ever want to know what's happening, follow the money. In so many things, in religion and politics, in business, follow the money, okay? And that will tell you what you need to know. What's the power dynamic here? What's the actual motivation? So often it comes down to that. Health and wealth, you'll get these by giving away your wealth. Sound illogical? Well, it is. Give me money and I'll cure your disease. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I remember I've always considered Peter Hitchens the wiser of the two brothers. I know I've met his. I loathe Peter Hitchens. I far prefer Christopher Hitchens. I've met Peter Hitchens a few times. I think he's a merkin. I remember Towers of Praise, this Nigerian church. Well, I was helping this guy at the internet cafe one time. He came in, showed me his leaflet, and saying our objectives: number 1, to love and serve our Lord Jesus Christ. Number 2, to acquire real estate. I summarize, I sort of simplify only slightly, and saying we're people of the highest probity, certified by the Nigerian Institute of Fiscal Integrity or something like that. I know, it was a scream. And there was another Nigerian church group I used to go to in Dubai, and they had a leaflet showing the house and car of their pastor, and they're very impressive too. Why? Some people are always willing to believe nonsense. The same drive makes them believe in Bigfoot, Atlantis. A sucker is born every minute. And, you're absolutely right. Desperate to believe these things, a bit like conspiracy theories. Oh, I'm so exciting, so clever. The truth is usually quite banal. you know. Whenever I know the inside story about things, I read in the media. Usually, it's sexed up in the media. They're highlighting a few things which are eye-catching, which are dramatic. The reality is actually more mundane. Uh, so why should I know that he lives in great wealth? A bit like a bishop, the proper word for a bishop's house is a palace, and often it really was that opulent. Why should they live like that? I know within Catholic Christianity, we have great iconography and splendor. We also have simplicity and people and asceticism, monks and nuns who reject material world and just barely keep body and soul together. So there's the whole range of that. And actually, they're different personality disorders which would tend towards either monkishness or extreme avarice and ostentation. So whatever happened to not showing off? So Paula White's got her groupies, those who idolise her, the hangers-on, people hero worshipping her, or maybe maybe I should say heroine worshipping her. So it's a cult growing up around her. Them and us. If you're inside the circle of trust, you're good. If you're outside, well, you're cast into the outer darkness. So the thing is, people ought to align their cognitions with each other. That'd be the rational thing to do. Something's got to give, but so often they don't. Christian evangelicals oppose healthcare. The preachers, and I can see why, because it would take away their audience if people got decent mental health care, or people didn't have to worry about paying for their health care because it's paid for through taxation. Anyway, so there's this misalliance between Christianity and the most exploitative kind of capitalism. Now, not all Christians, probably not most Christians in the United States, are into that. Some of them are more moderate Republicans or Democrats, independents, Greens, whatever. There's a thing called Christian socialism. But I submit it's an unholy alliance to say, yes, we should be able to keep people as wage slaves. That's a moral thing. That's what Jesus would do, suffer the little children and all the rest of it. Anyway, so some of these people have made a Faustian pact with Trump, who's about as far from Jesus as possible to be. An absolute brute, a liar, an adulterer, a thief, just everything which is vomit-inducing. The guy who owned all those casinos, I'm not against gambling, I've been to a casino once, but it certainly upsets Christian evangelicals. Casinos which are so associated with problem gambling, drug addiction, alcoholism, smoking, prostitution, the mob. I'm not a moralistic person. A lot of these things don't bother me, but they certainly fly in the face of Christian evangelical values. Often they're Puritans, a pure life, clean living. Oh, but Trump can break all our principles, and that's absolutely fine, just because he pretends to be anti-abortion. And there's fairly good evidence he's actually paid for abortions. So the GOP sold its soul to the devil long ago. But in Trump, who was so into hard sell, a con man with his Trump University, I know someone on this channel said to me, well, come on, just because it's got his name on it doesn't mean he's anything to do with it. Well, he was in the promotional videos. He said, well, Air Jordan, Michael Jordan didn't actually design those shoes. He's not saying that. Okay, well, Trump did say that he designed those courses. And the one thing about Air Jordan shoes is they were actually shoes. Whereas Trump University was not a university. It's like me calling this house a university and selling degrees with my face on the certificate or something. That would be a con. Anyway, it's a false analogy that was being drawn there. So, like the seed being sold is obviously, well, nonsense, but it's a supernatural thing, so it can't be disproved. George for Prime Minister, move aside Boris. Ooh, I would love that. But I have many handicaps which hold me back from that. I have this dirty habit of telling the truth. I don't suffer fools gladly. I've told a few quips in my time, and having told some off-color jokes that would rule me out. But Boris is allowed to get away with anything. There are these allegations 20 years ago that he sexually harassed two women, like one woman at some drinks party claiming he put his hand on her thigh. I can well believe that he did. I don't know it to be true. If he did, I think that's a tiny bit naughty. You know, they were adults. People are flirting at a drinks party, do these things. It's trifling, okay? I mean, I don't know exactly the circumstances. He thought that she was attracted to him or whatever. People get these things wrong occasionally. Of course, he said the whole thing is bull. And I don't think that should hold someone back. We should move on. I'm very glad this conservative who was caught, he submitted a false expense some years ago. he's been allowed to stand as a candidate. There should be some absolution for people who say something foolish, not trying to drive people out of politics. We can't elect anyone because everyone said something controversial. Anyway, so many of these televangelists in the US are running rackets, and the Inland Revenue Service has them tax exempt, which I think is deeply wrong. So mainstream Christianity denounces Paula White, and her religion, at very best, she's heterodox. But they think that, as I said, that affluence is a sign of divine grace. The Lord would give you money. Well, I don't think so. Look what he did to Job, his faithful servant, how much he suffered. Or that health is a sign of that, which is obviously nonsense when Jesus is saying that this disability is not a divine punishment. So the disciples were poor. Remember, they left their wealth and their families. So much for family values. Jesus is just splitting up families. Puritans, well, the pure life, that's what they were like, these early 17th century Protestants who helped set up America. The Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, I remember reading that 20 years ago as an undergraduate, but there was this idea that then you'll be amongst the elect if you're rich. That proves that you get a place in heaven. Only 100,000 places. So says the book of Revelation. We've got to work, hands to work and hearts to God, and never enjoy ourselves, and no frippery, and not too much food, and none of the good things in life, just to make money. What's the point of money if you never enjoy it? But anyway, unfortunately, that led to the idea that wealth was virtuous. If you're rich, you're a good person. If you're poor, it's your fault. Now, some rich people are good, and they have got there through hard work, and they have provided goods and services which are fantastic on the way. Some of them, shoddy goods, underpaid their workers, cut corners, exploited, dodged tax, or whatever, and kept it that way by rigging the system. And so that's bad. And some people are poor through no fault of their own, or they don't particularly aspire to wealth. It doesn't mean that they're sinful. But remember Jesus in the parable of the rich young man. You want to follow me? Give up all your worldly goods and come and follow me. Paula ought to remember that one. If she really wants to follow Jesus, why didn't she do as our Saviour exhorted her and leave all her worldly possessions? So she doesn't really want to follow him. She just wants to be shopping for diamonds. Would she get through the eye of a needle? I have my doubts. Well, a fool and his money are easily parted, as the timeless adage says. If you really believe that Paula is a good person, I've got a bridge to sell you. Now, on that note, I'm sure you want to book some online lessons with me, and please donate to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com, even though I can't guarantee you a place in heaven, or indeed on Patreon. I need donations to sustain this channel. Book me as a tour guide in London. Okay, good night.